You are a chosen one, but you're finding it difficult to be alone. For those of you who feel like living a solitary life is some form of punishment, I'm here to tell you it's not. There are people right now who think they are being punished for living in isolation, for not fitting in. But let me tell you this, what you're experiencing is not a curse. It's a blessing in disguise. Does that sound familiar? If you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. In fact, this feeling of solitude is something many of God's chosen have faced throughout history. The Bible is filled with stories of individuals who were set apart, often feeling isolated or alone because of their unique calling. Take Moses, for example. God chose Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, but before he stepped into his role as a leader, he spent 40 years in the desert, alone. Those years of isolation were necessary for Moses to grow into the person God intended him to be. Without that time away from the world, Moses would not have been prepared for the great task ahead. And what about Elijah? After his bold confrontation with the prophets of Baal, Elijah felt alone and abandoned. He fled into the wilderness, feeling like he was the only one left who was faithful to God. But in that solitude, God spoke to Elijah, renewing his strength and purpose. It was in the quiet of isolation that Elijah could hear God's voice clearly. Jesus himself often withdrew to solitary places to pray and connect with God. Despite being surrounded by followers, Jesus knew the value of stepping away, being alone, and seeking divine guidance. His periods of solitude were not times of punishment, but of preparation and empowerment. You too are part of this lineage, set apart for a greater purpose. Your loneliness isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that God is working in you, preparing you for what's to come. Chosen one, your solitude is a sacred time. Embrace it, for it's in this space that you will truly understand who you are and what God's purpose is for your life. Let me be real with you. Being alone isn't easy. The world is full of people telling you that you need to be social, that you need to be part of the crowd, that you're missing out on life if you don't have a ton of friends or aren't going to every event. But let me tell you the truth. You're not missing out on anything. The enemy, Satan, will do everything he can to make you believe that isolation is a punishment, that it means you're unworthy or forgotten. He'll plant thoughts in your mind that say, there's something wrong with you. You don't fit in because you're broken. But that's a lie. It's a lie meant to make you doubt who you are and who you're becoming. What Satan doesn't want you to know is this. Your isolation is your preparation. When you're alone, you have the space and time to grow into the person God created you to be. The world is full of vanity, endless distractions that pull people away from their true purpose. The parties, the social media, the material possessions, it's all nonsense designed to keep you from focusing on your higher calling. You've probably tried to fit in before, maybe in high school, maybe at work, maybe even with your own family. You tried to be like everyone else, to blend into the crowd, but it always felt forced, didn't it? That's because you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to stand out, to walk a path that's different from everyone else's, and that path requires solitude. Throughout the Bible, we see this over and over again. God separates those he has chosen. Look at Joseph. He was separated from his brothers, sold into slavery and thrown into prison. For years, Joseph was isolated from his family, from the life he knew. But during that time, God was preparing Joseph for something greater. When the time was right, Joseph was elevated to a position of power in Egypt, and he was able to save his entire family from famine. But that wouldn't have happened if Joseph hadn't gone through that period of isolation first. David is another example. Before he became king, David spent years running from Saul, hiding in caves, and living in isolation. But it was during those years that David grew in his faith, his strength, and his leadership. God was preparing David for the throne. But first, David had to go through a season of solitude. And let's not forget about John the Baptist. He lived in the wilderness, apart from society, eating locusts and wild honey. But John wasn't being punished. He was being prepared to be the voice crying out in the wilderness to prepare the way for Jesus. His isolation was part of God's plan for his life. You are no different. Your solitude is part of God's plan for your life. He is using this time to mold you, to shape you, to prepare you for something greater. You are set apart for a purpose, and that purpose requires you to be focused, to be clear-headed, and to be in tune with God's voice. And that can only happen when you're not distracted by the noise of the world. Chosen one, growth requires space. It requires quiet. It requires solitude. You can't grow when you're constantly surrounded by distractions. You can't hear God's voice when you're listening to the noise of the world. In this season of your life, you need to embrace the quiet. You need to embrace the solitude. This is your time to grow, to reflect, to meditate, and to become the person God created you to be. When you're alone, you have the opportunity to go inward, to connect with God on a deeper level, and to truly understand what His plans are for your life. Think about the Apostle Paul. After his conversion, Paul didn't immediately start preaching the gospel. No, he spent 3 years in Arabia, in solitude, learning and growing in his faith. It was during that time of isolation that Paul received the revelation he would later preach to the world. The same is true for you. Your isolation is your preparation. It's during this time that God will reveal things to you that you could never understand if you were distracted by the world. This is your time to grow in wisdom, in strength, and in faith. Don't waste it by wishing you were somewhere else, doing something else. Embrace it, and trust that God is using this time to prepare you for something greater. One of the biggest lies the enemy will tell you is that you're missing out. He'll make you feel like life is happening all around you, and you're stuck on the sidelines. But let me tell you the truth. You are not missing out on anything. In fact, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. The world is full of vanity, the parties, the social media, the material possessions. It's all an illusion. It's designed to distract you from what truly matters. The people who chase after these things are missing out on the most important thing of all, their relationship with God. You are different. You are set apart. God has chosen you for a higher calling, and that means you can't afford to be distracted by the nonsense of the world. Your time is too valuable. Your purpose is too important. Don't let the enemy make you feel like you're missing out, because the truth is, you're exactly where you need to be. In this season of solitude, you have a unique opportunity. You have the time and space to focus on your higher calling. This is your time to go deeper with God, to seek His guidance, and to understand what His plans are for your life. The world is full of distractions, but you are set apart. You don't need to chase after the things that everyone else is chasing. Your path is different. Your purpose is higher. And that means you need to stay focused. This is not the time to get caught up in other people's drama or to waste your energy on things that don't matter. You need to protect your energy, your focus, and your peace. This is your time to grow, to reflect, and to prepare for what God has in store for you. There will always be people who try to bring you down, people who don't understand your calling, people who are jealous, envious, or threatened by the light they see in you. These people will try to pull you into their negativity, but you must rise above it. Envy has no power over you. Jealous people cannot touch you because you are walking in the light of God's truth. Their negativity cannot affect you because you are focused on your higher calling. Remember what Jesus said in John 15:19, "If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you." The world will not understand you because you are chosen. You are walking a different path, a path that leads to eternal life and God's glory. And that means you don't need to worry about what other people think. God's opinion is the only one that matters. Chosen one, your purpose is greater than you can imagine. God has set you apart for a reason. He has chosen you because He knows you are capable of fulfilling His plan. Your solitude is not a punishment, but a blessing. It's during this time that God is preparing you for something greater. So, embrace your solitude. Embrace your calling. Trust that God is working in your life, even when you can't see it. This season of isolation is not the end. It's just the beginning. Remember the words of Jeremiah 29:11? "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." Trust in God's plan for your life. You are chosen, and your purpose is greater than you can imagine. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt isolated or struggled to understand your purpose. Remember, you are chosen, and your solitude is a blessing, not a curse. Until next time, take care, and God bless.